The first time I sort of realised that I wanted to become a songwriter was born out of two things: frustration because of not being able to be part of that process and just be in these bands, and the singer would come in with, well, here's the song, and then just play it, and you'd be sort of like, well, can we really do that better, don't you think? But then, you know, not sort of necessarily being allowed to, or depending on the dynamic. And then the other thing that I also worked out was that I started playing as a session player for lots of people, and you know, I was sort of looking at some other people who were doing the songwriting side of it, and you know, they were loaded, and I was getting nothing. I mean, I was getting like a couple of £100 to play in this band. I was like, hang on a minute, I think I'm on the wrong side of this. I'll do some writing.
But the motivation wasn't just to make the dollars, was it?
No. It was the main thing is the fact that it's the expression you have. You sort of, I think nearly all songwriters, I think everyone would agree that songwriters were a pretty complicated bunch of people. You need avenues to speak through, and it's a lot easier speaking through songs sometimes than it is through conversation.
So, working with Nana Cherry, you've worked with Paul McCartney. I mean, you've worked with some seriously famous artists and some up-and-coming artists as well. And we saw it, of course, in the video as well. And one of the biggest hits being, of course, James Blunt and You're Beautiful. Let's talk a bit more about that. What brought the two of you together initially?
James, I had a small publishing company that I'd set up with a couple of other guys who were much more well known than I was in the business, and I was a kind of young kid on it. We had an assistant who had gone to school with James, and he had said he was quite a posh English public school boy, same as James, and he was like, "Oh, you must hear my friend, he's jolly good, really good, you must hear him." And at that time, within the sort of music styles and stuff, it was all about kind of more beat-driven stuff. I mean, not that by any stretches Blunty renowned for being the coolest guy in the world now, but back then it was really uncool. And then, so I finally sort of went, all right, come on, let's have a listen. And I had listened to it, and I thought, oh, you know, well, there's something here. There's something in this guy's sort of individuality. There's the way he has a turn of phrase, the way he writes his lyrics and stuff. So I met him, and we got on really sort of quite well. And then it just a course over maybe a year or so of just building a relationship that we were, you know, became friends, but also that we were able to. He was, I think, I mean, I'll be fair to say, I'm not being rude about it, but he was quite naive at that stage. And I think he probably looked to me as somebody who was not so experienced and not so sort of successful that he could use me as the sounding board, and we could just sort of take this little trip together. You know, it turned out all right.
So was You're Beautiful really a beautiful moment, you know, when you were actually writing it? Just that did you know it was a hit, you know, at that very moment when it came out?
We wrote it I was doing a record out in Los Angeles, and at the time I was staying in a house with another artist, and James, I said, come over and we'll do some writing. Now there was another writing session with this other artist upstairs, which was much, much cooler because that was already signed and it was much more of a big thing. And we were the kind of, sort of, you know...
Kids in the basement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I remember, you know, we sat there and he had come in with this thing about going, okay, I want to do this thing on it's called You're Beautiful, and here's what I think the chorus melody should be. And I sort of looked at him a bit like, you don't want to do anything else? Like, change it at all? No, that's it. And then at that time, there was another record that I was really into, and I was like, oh, I'd love to do a song like that. And it kind of, I think, you know, like I said on DVD thing, you know, yeah, okay, we wrote it in 3 hours, but it took maybe the year before of us having a relationship, us being able to understand each other, trust each other, for that to be able to work in 3 hours.
Mm. And is it the same for Wise Man? Was it a very similar structure?
Wise Man was, yeah, except for, we did it with a friend of mine who I introduced to James called Jimmy Hogarth, who's a great, really good producer and writer. And that was a little bit more where we had to structure it, we had to try, and the way that song works is it needed, we battled with it for quite a while, and in the end we came up with this thing about how, it's quite boring, but we decided that in order to make this work, we had to, in the chorus, we had to go up. So we turned the kind of the major chord into the minor chord, we transferred it up a fourth, and it kind of all, it took a bit more song structuring that one rather than just a...
Just spewing it out like that, yeah, right. Can you give us a demonstration? Could you play?
I can, but then it means singing, and that's always...
Can we hear you sing? Would we like to hear him sing?
No!
Yeah. Would you like me to do the chorus with you?
What's that?
No.
Are you singing with me?
I brought my kazoo.
That's...
Sacha Skarbek, which one? You're Beautiful or Wise Man?
I think maybe we'll do Wise. Well, I mean, I can sort of show you roughly what we... If I can remember it. But,
7 seconds.
Not really. So James had the kind of... I don't want to sing anything to avoid the singing. he had the kind of melody thing. She said to me, go steady on me. Won't you tell me what the wise men said when they came down from heaven? Smoked 9 till 7, all the shit that they could find.
And then the high beat.
So he had sort of come up with that, and we had this kind of 4-chord thing going, but then the problem we had was the chorus was he was wanting to kind of stay in the same area. So between Jim and I, we worked out that we went down to this. Really sorry now for what they've gone. They've got 3 wise men trying to have some fun. And then this was our big moment. We went, oh, aren't we clever? Went to the minor chord. Look who's alone now. It's not me. It's not me. Those 3 wise men, they've got her singing by the sea. Gotta ask yourself the question, where are you now? Gotta ask yourself the question, where are you now? So that's... But that's how we kind of arrived at getting that done, and it was a bit more of a kind of crafting thing until we got to the middle 8, where we were like, oh, I think we've spent all of our kind of brain power and capacity. So I was like, okay, it's got to be a Fender Rhodes solo because I can do that. And I was like, yeah, that's my part there. So that was for Wise Men. Was that Beautiful? Was a kind of again, it was a bit of an exercise in. I was always, you know, coming from the sort of jazz school thing of things. There was a lot of this, and lots of chords, and as many things as I could fit in as possible. And then I meet someone like Blunty, who was just, you know, had a real kind of 4-chord thing going on. But it was actually it worked really, really well. And we sort of, when I heard his thing that he had for the chorus, I was then like, okay, well, we've got to find a verse that's going to sort of work with this. And it was about finding the kind of chords that were simple, but that still evoked the right sense of emotion and what he was wanting to kind of say. And again, it was another one of a bit of a strange one where you use normally when you're writing, trying to write pop songs and hit songs or whatever, you're always trying to go up into the chorus and make it like that sort of thing. And in this instance, we kind of, was it, my life is brilliant, my love is pure, damn sure, somebody's man, but I want to do some Superman. I have to do it very quick. Because I've got a plan, and then it was just, okay, ooh, beautiful, beautiful. And it was one of the, I think a lot of other songwriters or a lot of other artists, or maybe that I had done that with, they would go, oh no, you can, no, I don't want to be on the same first chord. I want to be on a different one. But he was like, no, that works. It's great. It's cool. So beautiful, it's true. And then the kind of the only bit that where we tried to put some colour in it, which was again work with the lyric. There must be an angel with a smile on her face. When she thought I should be with you, but it's time to face the truth. I will never be with you. And when we finished it, we kind of looked at each other and went, yeah, that's all right. I think it's probably all right. Yeah, what do you reckon? Should we go and get a beer? Yeah.
Thank you. Can you learn to be a songwriter, or is it something that only talent can provide for you, in your view?
I think, well, no, you can definitely learn to be. You can analyse, work it out, and regurgitate, sort of thing. But then I think you're in a certain area. I think most of it is to do with who you are as a person and what mainly how messed up you are and how much you need to write.
Right. So every single song is a sort of somehow an expression of yourself, even when you're co-writing with somebody else. Would that be kind of?
Yeah, I think so. I think it may not in every single song, but certainly if you've had, say, a bunch of songs where you feel like you've been very contained and you've been writing in a certain way, without a doubt, even subconsciously, in the next batch, or the next one you do, it will be far more, probably a low, whether it's frustration, anger, hurt, whatever it may be, will come out in that side of it.
Having worked with so many interesting artists over time, I wonder whether any of the times you've co-written with someone, if it's ever you just had to consider it as a gig because the artist just wasn't quite up to scratch. Do you know what I'm saying? Have you had that experience, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, many times.
Right, okay. So how do you deal with that moment when you, as you said, it's a job?
Well, I suppose it's for a lot of people, an actor does a great movie, but then he has to go and do, Spider-Man 5 or something, whatever it is, because Spider-Man 5 pays for him so that he can do all the other independent stuff and all the other stuff he wants to do. I have a great studio, great bunch of people that I work with, musicians, stuff like that. Sometimes you have to make decisions, you have to bring in the money in order to be able to do that. So you just lie back and think of England.
Right.